Ladies and gentlemen, SideStrafe back with World of Warships, and today I'm going to bring you a live stream highlight featuring the Clemson class destroyer for the Americans. This is of course a tier 4, and I don't think I've showcased destroyers yet on my channel, so I thought that I would go ahead and use one of the matches from our recent live stream to kind of give you a basic idea of how they play. I'd also like to point out that in this match I was joined by Bismarck and Bombadil of No Guts, No Galaxy. If you are curious about their channels, I will have them linked in the description below. But let's get to the match at hand. Destroyers. If I'm to have a worst nightmare in this game, it might be a good destroyer captain, or perhaps even an aircraft carrier captain that's great at utilizing torpedo bombers. But with that said, it's all about the torpedoes on these destroyers, and even more so for the Japanese, who have far more effective torpedoes with better range. The Americans, I think, are a lot shorter, but they have better deck guns, so the main battery is usually faster firing and can rotate faster than that of the Japanese. Although in a recent patch, I believe the Japanese got slight buffs to some of their destroyers in regards to their main battery. But again, really you want to kind of focus on your torpedoes because they are the most devastating weapons in the game, or at least it seems like it so far. I haven't really checked out some of the final main battery guns on the late tier ships, but they pack a punch and they'll bring down the mightiest of ships. On top of that, they are so small that they actually have a better stealth bonus than most of the other vessels in this game. So when we're talking about invisible gameplay mechanics, which I'm not really a huge fan of in World of Tanks or this game, it is part of the game and it's something that you do have to get used to. These things can become invisible simply based on distance. I think the Clemson is good up to about 7 kilometers range, so if you see an enemy and the second you breach 7 kilometers, that's when you're going to get detected, unless you're firing your deck guns. Just like in World of Tanks, if you fire your main gun, that breaks your stealth. So for the most part, you want to stick to great distances, utilize torpedoes, because torpedoes don't break your stealth, I believe. And you, of course, also have a smoke canister that you can apply via the T key. Now, speaking of smoke, I know some of you have questioned its usage in my previous videos. You've probably seen a few ships just pop out of existence, and that's of course the invisible gameplay mechanics at work. But really what's happening most of the time is it's because somebody in a destroyer is popping their smoke canister, and you're zoomed into the smoke to the point where you can't really tell that there's smoke, and so that when you zoom out, you then see it. And that's your explanation for why a lot of ships are just kind of popping out when they're in the open. The other thing is, of course, just simply range. There might be something out there that we don't see because we're not close enough to it. It's not as jarring, I think, as it is in World of Tanks, but it's still kind of annoying because sometimes you'll just see a ship instantly pop out of existence. As we've discussed before, it would be nice if Wargaming could perhaps implement something a little bit more gradual, like a gentle fade or transition to stealth mode instead of actually just a direct pop. More so an aesthetic component to keep you immersed, but again, it's not game breaking and you'll just get used to it. The only thing that might be questionable about the mechanic, the invisible stuff, is the fact that you are on a ship and there's potentially hundreds, if not thousands, of crew on the ship. You're almost wondering, well, how can you not see that sometimes when it's just out in the open there? So again, it's a little weird. It's not everybody's favorite mechanic. I know it's not mine. It's probably always going to be one of my complaints about wargaming titles. But again, I feel like it's worse in World of Tanks than it is here for some reason. Now, as far as this match is concerned, don't worry, you are going to see quite a bit of action. This is just kind of the calm before the storm, at least for Bombadil, Bismarck, and myself. At this point, I'm just sticking with them as much as possible in order to provide support. However, here we are starting to see some targets get a little too close for comfort, so we're going to go ahead and try to engage here if we can. So what's not so great about destroyers? Well, they don't have a lot of armor. So if you're getting hit by main battery, you're not going to last long, especially if it's focus fire from a variety of ships. On top of that, if you get hit by 1 or 2 torpedoes, that could be it. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, it definitely hurts. Thankfully, you do have the speed and the size, so you can usually avoid torpedoes, even those dropped by those sneaky torpedo bombers from aircraft carriers. Now, of course, having discussed the fact that destroyers have very little armor, that means you're probably going to want to use high explosive ammunition against them, simply because you don't have to worry about trying to penetrate thick armor. So if you can do it, if your guns can reload fast enough, such as, of course, on the cruiser Cleveland, or maybe even another destroyer, then load up that HE and start tackling other destroyers, because you're also going to have a higher chance to set them on fire with HE. You're going to have a higher chance to destroy components like deck guns, propulsion systems, torpedo launchers, and if you can especially hit the propulsion on a destroyer, well, you're taking away one of its main benefits. A destroyer that's not moving is dead in a few seconds. Now, taking a look at the match at hand, you can see that we've got 3 contacts to our starboard side, 2 immediate threats, a destroyer and battleship Miyogi there. I'm using the lead indicator here with the torpedoes, changing the spread to narrow, and firing those torpedoes in hopes of maybe hitting the Miyogi. Now, a mistake on his part would be to not change course. You can see my torpedoes out there on the right side. I decide to open up with some main battery as well. This, of course, will take away my stealth ability. He will see where my gunshots are coming from, but I'm banking on the fact that I'm just so fast that he can't turn his guns on me. A few more shots out there. Watch those torpedoes. Boom. Connection. 4 strikes there, causing flooding. He's critically damaged, and you can see there his health is drastically reduced. That is the power of torpedoes, ladies and gentlemen. Now I decide to keep moving, utilizing cover here to maybe get around the enemy. Just like World of Tanks, if you're in a light tank, you want to keep moving and use cover as much as possible so as to not get hit. You get hit, you die fast. Now moving around here, we can see some other targets, light cruisers, it looks like. We could, of course, use high explosive on a light cruiser as well, but I decided to go for armor piercing here at this range with my main guns. Now, I notice a lot of destroyer captains don't like using main battery because it breaks their stealth. Some pretty much rely 100% on torpedoes, but again, the selling point to the American destroyers is their main battery, so I like to utilize it, especially if the enemy is not paying any attention to me. I figure that I'm not going to hit anything here with torps, but I am hitting them easily with these main guns, so why the hell not? Now in this situation you can see that there's a lot of red out there. Some of them aren't really paying attention to me, which is fine, but there's a cruiser over to my port side that is not quite fond of me shooting at his friends. So I'm going to start moving the opposite direction if I can. Gets a good hit on me there though, setting me on fire, taking out propulsion, but we enter damage control mode. If he hits me again like that, then we're in big trouble. Torpedoes out, narrow spread in hopes of hitting him. Now, again, for the most part, he might not be able to see these torpedoes until it's too late, just because that seems to be how torps work in general. I'm going to turn my ship, start moving so that I'm a harder target, firing rear guns if I need to, but as we take a look there, torpedoes...
Enemy severely damaged. Enemy cruiser sunk.
More than severely damaged. He is sunk. And that is typically what happens when you fight a destroyer. You're not paying attention, you're not watching where they're moving, and all of a sudden there's torpedoes and it's too late to move out of the way. But here's another thing that you don't want to do in this game, and that's beat yourself on an island. Poor Furry the Snake. Yeah, that's happened to me a few times, and it will probably continue to happen. You really just gotta always maintain total situational awareness. Zoom in, take your shots, zoom out, and watch where you're going. Take a look at the mini-map. Use autopilot if you need to. It takes a while to get used to. I've screwed up so many times. Usually every live stream where I'm distracted talking to viewers and whatnot, I'm crashing into islands. It's something that happens usually within the first 3 games. Then I get warmed up and I start to realize, okay, focus, and then I crash less. But it happens, guys, and it's no big deal. Anyway, here you can see just trying to take some pot shots at destroyers because they are annoying and I wish them to be dead. Just because I know how annoying I've been this match. You can see though that I don't have much health. I can't really take much of a beating here. And so I have to be really careful. Now popping smoke. I believe I did this to cover either Bombadil or Bismarck. I also saw that some enemies were showing themselves and I was in the open. I didn't have any cover, so I figured to go ahead and pop so as to make a retreat back to cover. Now, I'm sure some of you are noticing that I have my anti-aircraft systems turned off. That's a little yellow off icon with the plane above it next to the high explosive ammo indicator. That is for a very good reason, because when anti-aircraft guns fire, it breaks your stealth, just the same as if you fire your main battery guns. So if you've popped smoke and you're trying to stay under cover, you don't want to be shooting at aircraft that's up above trying to find you, because it'll break your cover and stealth and people will be aware of your presence and you will usually not last very long. So I do keep it off for most of this match. The anti-aircraft systems on this ship aren't so amazing that I need them anyway. I would probably leave them on other ships like the Cleveland and whatnot because that's part of their selling point. But with the destroyer, more about the stealth, even though I'm breaking that right now by just shooting main guns anyway. But as you can see, totally worth it in that case. Here we've got another threat on the port side. Narrow spread torpedoes out. I'm thinking here I'm dead. Secondary battery guns on the way, destroying my launchers and main guns. I'm just going to let him have it with everything I've got. Torpedoes making their impact. He's down.
Enemy battleship destroyed.
You can once again just see the absolutely devastating power of torpedoes and how they saved me there against a battleship. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as you may have noticed, this match was not in our favor. We were taking a lot of losses early on, and it just came down to Bombadil, Bismarck, and myself, as well as one other teammate there. We managed to hold our owns and just simply bring this match around. And at this point now, it's all about aircraft carrier hunting, which can be fun, but more often than not leads to a draw, simply because the aircraft carriers are hanging out in the backs of the maps or hiding behind islands or corners where you just can't find them in time. And we've talked about the matches needing maybe an extra 5 minutes, simply because more often than not it comes down to trying to find the last ship. And even though the maps aren't super huge, they still can provide enough distance against slow-moving ships that it's hard to get the win by elimination. Anyways, as you can see here, Langley aircraft carrier sighted. That's a early tier aircraft carrier for the Americans. Some torpedoes on the way. I'm just loading up HE here to continue to fire upon the target. Now, the one thing I didn't even think about, though, getting close to this Langley, was the fact that it does actually have secondary battery guns. Now, the secondary battery on a ship is generally smaller caliber guns that are used to fire at shorter ranges. In this game, they're controlled by your ship's AI. So if a ship gets within a certain radius, your guns will start automatically firing. You can kind of prioritize these targets by switching to your mouse cursor mode and clicking on the target of choice. But if you get too close, the secondary battery will end you, so you have to be really careful. And that's a mistake I almost made by getting too close to the Langley. You can see there, secondary battery defensive guns opening up. I've fired some torpedoes out. We've managed to set them on fire, which means no planes can leave or land. And there it is.
Enemy aircraft carrier destroyed.
Torpedoes once again taking out another vessel. That's a total of 10 torpedo hits for this match. Absolutely devastating. The destroyer lives up to its name. It's just brutal. And this is just a tier 4 American destroyer. You can imagine how deadly these things are in the right hands. There's quite a few people out there that are far better at destroyers than I am. In fact, this is probably my only real decent game with this ship, but I had to share it just because it was so much fun to play. It was a great comeback, and I think it's just a prime example of what destroyers can do. A lot of people, of course, do favor the Japanese because they have better torpedoes. It seems like they've got more range, but the American destroyers can hold their own. You just have to play them a little bit differently. They are more close range dependent. I think those main battery guns are something that you just simply can't forget about. If all you want to do is play with torpedoes, if you want to use stealth and just drop torpedoes constantly, then you're probably going to want to look at the Japanese line. Otherwise, you have to focus on using both your torpedoes and your main battery guns in order to take out targets with the American destroyers. How it might change at later tiers, I'm not sure, but some of the late tier American destroyers look fantastic, especially the Fletcher class and the gearing, I believe. Now, with that said, while I do find destroyers to be quite enjoyable, I don't know that they'll be my main focus. I think I'll probably work on cruisers and battleships when the game actually goes live. Really curious to see how the American battleships turn out and what differentiates them from the Japanese battleships. But beyond that, I think destroyers will mostly be a side project for me because they are fun. They can be quite a bit of fun even at early tiers. And I think that's the other thing I've noticed about this game is that at early tiers versus the early tiers in World of Tanks, there's more fun to be had. It just seems like the ships at lower tiers aren't as gimped as the tanks can be. I know a lot of you probably love playing your early tier tanks once in a while and just kind of seal clubbing, but there's something ultimately more satisfying about the early tier ship combat than early tier tank combat. It might be the absurd amount of weaponry that some of the vessels have. For example, the St. Louis just has so many guns on it. It's just very satisfying to fire them all off and hit targets multiple times. I've even said in various live streams that the St. Louis is definitely a keeper ship. You want to make space in your port for that one because it's just so much fun. I could see myself going back to play it from time to time. On top of that, I've noticed that within this game, you don't feel as gimped if you're a stock ship. In World of Tanks, if you're stock, you're pretty much apologizing to your team. You don't have your tracks, you don't have the best engine, you don't have the best gun. Sometimes you just feel absolutely useless. Well, in this game, even if you're stock, you don't feel useless. You don't feel slow and cumbersome. You don't feel like you can't do any damage. There just seems to be a better overall design philosophy, and that's to be expected. I mean, let's face it, Wargaming has now made a few other games, and they've got some experience. They've learned from the mistakes of both World of Tanks and World of Warplanes, and they're able to ultimately create a better title with World of Warships. I just hope that we can see some of these ideas in World of Tanks. Obviously, two different animals, but I think there are some ideas that we can take from this game and implement them in a World of Tanks overhaul. Will it ever happen? I don't know. But I think I managed to hold my own on that one. What do you guys think? Yeah, I think we did all right. Special thanks, of course, to Bismarck and Bombadil for joining me. Channel links in the description below if you're curious about checking out their content. Highly recommended. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, really hope that you're enjoying the World of Warships content. A whole lot more on the way, so stay tuned, and I will definitely see you on the next one.